assessments has sent fresh shockwaves through the Capitol, raising questions not just about battlefield strategy, but about transparency, readiness, and trust inside the American military itself. Reports, citing senior analysts and people with direct knowledge of classified damage assessments, indicate that a recent round of strikes from Iran may have struck more than 100 US-based targets across the region. The accounts describe damage that goes beyond blast marks and shattered windows, the kind that can degrade operational capability for weeks, months, or longer. Runways, advanced radar installations, aircraft, command centers, warehouses, hangars, and satellite communication facilities are all listed among the sites hit. The damage, those familiar with the assessments say, spans multiple countries, painting a picture of an operation with wide geographic reach and real tactical effect. Officials and independent analysts differ on the full tally. One senior analyst warned that repair bills alone could climb into the billions, with some estimates of visible replacement and runway repair costs reaching into the single-digit billions. At the same time, other cost estimates offered in congressional hearings put the air-to-air and strike munitions used over recent weeks at roughly $25 billion, a figure that has drawn both scrutiny and disagreement from budget staff and line officers alike. In a Washington where every dollar is argued over and every figure is used as a political cudgel, those gaps matter. They shape how lawmakers think about supplemental funding, how service chiefs explain readiness shortfalls, and how the public measures the price of confrontation. On the Hill this week, those broader strategic and fiscal questions intersected with a bitter, more personal debate about leadership. Lawmakers grilled senior defense officials about the removal of a 4-decade Army officer who, by public reporting, served in a series of command and opera watches at the SO leadership roles, including as Commanding General at 1st Corps at Joint Base Lewis McChord and as Chief of Staff of the Army. The hearing was blunt in tone and sharp in focus. Why remove a senior officer in the middle of an active conflict when continuity of command and institutional memory are most needed? A lawmaker pressed the issue directly. What specific national security risk, mission risk, or leadership concern did this officer present that justified his removal in the middle of active operations? Was the action taken on operational grounds, or was it about loyalty to a political leader? That line of questioning cut to the heart of one of the oldest tensions in American civil-military relations: how to balance civilian control with professional military judgment, especially during crisis. The exchange was heated. A senior official responded with a phrase that has long circulated inside the Pentagon: officers serve at the pleasure of the president. The official day fended moves to refresh leadership and to ensure the president has the best team for the task, but questions remained about whether the removal strengthened the force or created an avoidable disruption at a precarious moment. Throughout the hearing, members repeatedly invoked the consequences of personnel decisions on everything from recruiting to morale to force modernization. No amount of money can compensate for a force that may lose trust in the fairness of advancement. One committee member said, pressing the administration on whether promotions and assignments remain merit-based, the concern was not abstract. A perception that advancement is not based on performance, but on other considerations, can corrode the willingness of talented officers and enlisted personnel to stay in uniform or to invest in long-term careers. At several points, the exchange turned personal and sharp. In one exchange, a senior official said, "I stand by what I said last time you were here, you were in comm." And then you're incompetent now, and you're the gift that keeps on giving when it comes to incompetence. The line landed in the hearing room like a thrown glove, prompting both laughter and admonition from members. It underscored how raw and public these confrontations have become, a reminder that oversight hearings are as much about political positioning as they are about fact-finding. Another lawmaker pushed on the ethics and legality of rhetoric on the battlefield. In order for no quarter or no survivors is a war crime under the Geneva Conventions, the congressman said, asking plainly, "You understand that's murder. Do you stand by that statement?" The question was pointed. The reply circled back to doctrine and rules of engagement. The Department of War fights to win, and we ensure that our warfights have the rules of engagement necessary to be as effectively, the official replied, an answer that left some members unsatisfied and others nodding the doctrine. Net and training must be clear in the heat of conflict. The broader fiscal picture, the price tag of the conflict, was another battleground. Officials have offered different aggregates in testimony: operational costs, replacement of munitions and aircraft, repair of the bases, and long-term sustainment. One senior figure testified to a $25 billion figure tied largely to munitions expended and associated operational costs. When pressed on whether that number included replacement of damaged infrastructure and the price of replacing aircraft and systems in today's dollars, the official said adjustments might be needed and deferred to the comptroller for the definitive tally. That answer prompted a logged retort from a committee member who called the accounting incompetence. The hearing also returned to an anguished, sensitive subject that has drawn intense media and congressional attention: the toll on civilians. Lawmakers asked bluntly how much the United States knew about the civil. Casualties tied to strikes that hit a school and killed children. Officials said the situation was under investigation. That unfortunate situation remains under investigation. One senior official said, resisting a demand to put a dollar figure on the human cost. You don't know how much it will cost Americans in terms of their increased cost in gas and food over the next year because of the Iran war, a lawmaker asked, challenging the Pentagon to quantify indirect economic effects. The response pivoted to a broader rhetorical question: what is the cost of letting a potential adversary acquire a nuclear weapon? That pivot crystallized a recurring theme from defenders of robust action. The costs of inaction, of tolerating the spread of a nuclear capability, are, in their view, essentially incalculable. In the hearing, one official attempted a blunt framing. What is the cost of Iran holding that straight at issue with nuclear weapons? It's $631 billion, which means it's an incorrect base of $5,000 a year for American households. That figure, offered in the course of a heated exchange, was presented as a way to force lawmakers to consider strategic trade-offs between near-term expenses and long-term existential risk. It provoked immediate pushback. Members demanded the underlying analysis, questioned assumptions, and pressed for independent review. Behind these headline figures and combative exchanges are real operational questions that soldiers and sailors face every day. If runways are damaged, sorties are delayed. If radar arrays are degraded, early warning and airspace control are raid. If satellite communications are hit, the flow of command and control signals. The ability to coordinate logistics, fires, and intelligence is compromised. That is why, even as numbers get tossed around in hearings and on talk shows, military commanders emphasize system redundancy, rapid repair capabilities, and prepositioned stockpiles. Yet there are limits to how much resiliency can be baked in, and there are political constraints on how much the American taxpayer will underwrite. The controversy over the removal of a senior officer in the middle of these operations is therefore more than a personnel dispute. For critics, it symbolizes a risk that short-term political calculations could override professional military judgment at precisely the moment when institutional competence is most valuable. Was he removed because he challenged some decisions? And I guess my question is this about loyalty to prisoners? Is this about loyalty to a political leader? Or is it about what's good for the mission? One lawmaker asked, the question is an old one, but in times of crisis, it becomes newly urgent. Another thread running through the hearing was the question of disclosure. Members of Congress, and by extension the public, want to know how much damage occurred, where it occurred, and what the United States did in response. Secrecy is a necessary part of operations, particularly to protect tactic, force, and sources. But too much secrecy, critics say, fuels suspicion that the executive branch is understating setbacks or overstating successes for political reasons. That suspicion can be corrosive in a democracy and damaging to the military's relationship with its civilian overseers. Beyond doctrine and dollars, the hearing revealed a palpable frustration with the institutional tone inside the Pentagon. One witness used the phrase, "change the culture of a department that was been destroyed by the wrong perspectives," arguing that removing senior officers is part of a broader effort to reshape priorities and leadership norms. Opponents called that a politicization of the force and argued that the sacrifices of a generation of officers should not be dismissed as mere personnel turnover. As lawmakers argued, another practical concern surfaced: supplemental funding. If additional funds are requested to cover shortfalls for munitions, for repair, and for replacement equipment, how will Congress respond? Some members insisted that any supplemental must be narrowly tailored to immediate needs related to operations, while others argued for a broader approach that addresses long-term readiness and deterrence for the entire region. The underlying tension is familiar, the impulse to fund what is urgent and visible versus the need to invest in the platforms and training that prevent crises from recurring. The hearings closed without neat resolutions. Investigations continue into the incidents that have caused civilian casualties. Damage assessments remain fluid, and cost estimates are being revised as inspectors and engineers move into affected facilities. The personnel debate, too, shows no sign of abating. Lawmakers say they will seek greater transparency. Officials say they will defend their prerogative to make leadership changes they believe strengthen the mission. For the public, the practical takeaway is sobering. Modern military operations, even those conducted far from American shores, impose a price that is measured in more than munitions and repair bills. They impose political costs, economic consequences, and moral burdens. They stress institutions, test relationships between elected leaders and professional military officers, and force a country to choose which risks it will accept and which threats it will try to deter at potentially great expense. In the coming weeks, the definitive tallies will matter. The comptroller's numbers, the engineer's damage assessments, and after-action reviews will all feed into appropriations decisions and into the strategic calculus of whether to intensify, sustain, or taper USKP operations. Lawmakers will continue to press for detail, veterans and family members will demand answers about the human cost, and military commanders will press for the tools and clarity they say they need to keep service members safe and effective. What is clear is this: the interplay between operational reality and political. Oversight is on full display. When bases and systems are damaged, the immediate concern is tactical: how to repair, replace, and resume operations. But those tactical fixes sit atop a strategic question about national purpose and national will. How much are we willing to spend? How much risk are we willing to accept? And how transparent must our leaders be in explaining those trade-offs to the American people? As the hearings and investigations proceed, one sentence from the dialogue captures the tension raw